February in the UK is LGBTIQA History Month, and while the acronym we all use may vary, we all mean the same thing. Whether you're gay, bi, trans, intersex or queer, this month is for us to look back at the queer history of this world, when many would insist that we didn't exist before the modern era. Over the next 4 weeks we're going to tell you about some inspirational queer stories from history, some of which you may not have known before. When it comes to our history, specifically transgender history, many people will think of Marsha P. Johnson and Stonewall. And while Marsha is an icon and trailblazer in her own right, she isn't the only example of a trans person in history. Trans people have always been here, and we can trace evidence of trans people right back to the 1300s in the UK with Eleanor Reichner. Eleanor was a trans woman who lived in London in the 1300s. She worked as a barmaid and as an embroideress, which at the time were jobs primarily held by women. She also worked as a sex worker. We sadly don't know too much about Eleanor. What we do know comes from the fact that in 1394 she was arrested for having sex with a man called John Britby. Eleanor was arrested on 2 charges of prostitution and sodomy. Sex workers weren't really being arrested at the time in London, and sodomy wasn't against criminal law, so was taken to an ecclesiastical court. And there is no evidence that Eleanor was convicted of either offence. During the trial, Eleanor spoke of being introduced to sex with men through a woman called Elizabeth Broder. Elizabeth was also a seamstress which helped provide Eleanor with female clothes. The court transcripts are where we get all of our information on Eleanor from, including the fact that she slept with both men and women, including members of the clergy and nuns. Sadly, in recent years, Eleanor has become a subject of a cis-het whitewash over her history, with many historians insisting that she only dressed as a woman for her sex work, and some of these historians even going so far as to dead name her in these documents, something we won't be doing in this video out of respect to Eleanor. Another notable trans person from history is Lucy Hicks Anderson, who was born in Kentucky in 1886. Lucy knew from a young age that she was in fact a woman, going so far as to asking her parents to call her Lucy as a child. As a result, her parents took her to see the family doctor, who surprisingly for the time recommended they respect her decision, which allowed Lucy to start her transition. Lucy left school at 15 and started domestic work as a means to support herself. She became a very skilled cook and even went as far as winning several baking competitions. Lucy then settled in New Mexico, where she met her first husband, Clarence Hicks. Her and Clarence together ran a brothel. The marriage only lasted around 9 years, but during that time Lucy was able to save enough money that she could buy her own property, a boarding house which she used as a front for a brothel. In the brothel she also sold alcohol, which at the time was illegal due to prohibition in America. Lucy also became a well-known socialite during this time, and her connections came in handy. According to the scholar C. Riley Norton, when the sheriff arrested her one night, her double-barreled reputation paid off. Charles Donlan, the town's leading banker, promptly bailed her out. He had scheduled a huge dinner party which could have collapsed dismally, with Lucy in jail. In 1944, Lucy married again, this time to an American soldier called Reuben Anderson, who was based in Long Island, New York. In 1945, a sailor reported that he'd caught an STI from one of the sex workers at Lucy's brothel. As a result of this, all of the women at the brothel had to have a medical examination, including Lucy. It was due to this examination that Lucy was put on trial for perjury, for lying about her sex on her marriage certificate, as well as impersonating a woman. During the trial, Lucy said, "I defy any doctor in the world to prove that I am not a woman. I have lived, dressed, acted as what I am, a woman." As a result of this trial, Lucy was also charged with fraud by the federal government, as during the war she'd been claiming the allotted payments to her soldiers' wives through the GI Bill. Lucy was also charged with failing to register for the draft. However, these charges were dismissed once Lucy had proved that she was too old to register. Lucy and Reuben were both found guilty and were sentenced to incarceration at a men's prison, where by court order Lucy was forbidden from presenting as female. After their release, Lucy and Reuben moved to LA, where they lived quietly until Lucy's death in 1954 at the age of 68. Lucy and Eleanor were just 2 ordinary women trying to live their truth, but due to the times in which they lived were not accepted. And while trans rights have progressed so far in recent years, trans people are still one of the most marginalised and discriminated groups in the world. This discrimination is fueled by hate speech that is shared by fantasy novelists, actors, and even members of the government under the guise of radical feminism. It is as important to support our trans siblings now as it has ever been, whether they fit in the gender binary or not. It is important for us to take a stand and declare that trans women are women, trans men are men, and non-binary people are valid. If you've liked this video, please consider clicking like and leaving a comment down below. Click here to watch some of our other videos, including our previous documentary series, Queervism. And of course, don't forget to click subscribe and the bell icon to keep up to date with our future releases, including the rest of this series.